an omniversal comic book podcast that does a deep dive into the multiverse. What is Dear Watchers?
I see what you did there. It's Jeopardy, and we are traveling with you through the stories and the worlds that make up an omniverse of fictional realities we all love. And your Jeopardy game show hosts on this journey are me, Guido.
And me, Rob. And before we begin our trip to the jungle, welcome to the jungle. What's new in our little section of the multiverse, Guido?
Well, our last episode was so much fun. If you didn't listen to it because you were avoiding Deadpool and Wolverine spoilers, hopefully you've seen the movie now. Go back and listen to it with our special guest, Elliot of Elliot Comic Art. We're seeing the movie a second time, just very soon after we're recording this. And it was so much fun to explore, and it seems like people are loving it as much as we did. So go back and listen to our last episode.
And I avoided spoilers beforehand, so hopefully other people also got that same experience, because it's so hard today to really avoid spoilers. Yeah.
Well, hopefully they're getting better with that just as an industry to the extent possible, just less leaks and more control, which is nice as a fan of stories. Speaking of stories, my book Queer Mythology, coming out in October, has my first book event in person in Brooklyn in New York, October 6th, and there's a few more already in process being scheduled. So look for some events in October when the book releases, which I'm so excited about. And then the last thing I'm really excited about should be the most exciting thing for us, because it's our third anniversary of our show. 3 years. 3 years.
Yay.
And Elliot drew us surprise art that we posted and he posted. So find us on social media at Dear Watchers, and you can see the art he drew. Find him on social media at Elliot Comic Art with 2 L's, 1 T. But 3 years, over 140 hours. My gosh.
Yeah, I was just scrolling through Instagram and suddenly it was like, wait a second, that's us.
That's us.
Because he didn't even tell us. I just found it in real time with everybody else.
It was very fun, and yeah, it's been fun. Did you imagine we'd be here 3 years later?
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Neither of us had like really clear designs on this project when we started, so I think we had decided we were just going to do it because we wanted to do it and it was fun, and we're going to keep doing it because it's fun.
Yeah,
but our structure has stayed the same remarkably since the beginning.
Yes, and switching to every other week, which we did a while back, definitely I think also helped our sanity. I think if we tried to keep doing it every week, maybe we would have gone, oh gosh, this is a little too much.
Well, we both have lots of other creative projects in the works, and that's the fun thing about doing this work is it's opened up new opportunities. So that's why we had to go to every other week. But we're really excited that we've been doing it for 3 years, 140 plus episodes. We had some bonus episodes there for a while, and we're not going anywhere.
And if you're joining us for the first time, well, where have you been for the last 3 years? That's my question. And speaking of 3, we have 3 parts of our journey through the multiverse today: origins of the story, exploring multiversity, and pondering possibility. So thanks for coming along.
And remember to leave us a 5-star review wherever you're listening to us, and find us on social media, Dear Watchers.
And with that, Dear Watchers, welcome to episode 140, and let's check out what's happening in the Omniverse with our travels to today's alternate universe. Today, we are becoming one with nature to answer the question...
Is that right? I don't know.
Sure, yeah. What if Wolverine teams up with Ka-Zar, Shanna, and Namor to save endangered species from, ironically, the Conservator?
Which is also like definitely a lawyer who manages like people's wills, you know, like in probate court you hear about like the Conservator. So it's kind of funny that there's a villain in the Conservator that has absolutely nothing to do with that aspect of being a conservator, but it's just funny. So this world that we're exploring today, we're breaking our own rules, kind of.
Whoa.
Over 3 years and over 140 hours of content, we've really not broken our rules. Our rule being that we start with something about the Prime canon and the origin of the story. The second segment, we go into some sort of twist on it, an alternate universe or multiverse or some sort of crash or clash or mashup. And then we go into what's next, what's in the future, what we want, or what story was written after. But apparently this core story that we're focusing on today is a 616 story, meaning the prime Marvel comic canon. But we don't buy it, so we're covering it as an alternate universe. If one day we're proven wrong, if there's a sequel or somehow mainstream 616 comics refer to this, or the Conservator shows up again, we look forward to being told that we were wrong. But we're treating it as another Earth for today. And as far as our background with Wolverine on the show, there have been a whole bunch of episodes that have included him sort of on the side, because of course we've covered X-Men lots and lots of times, but he was not a focal point for us until episode 135, just a few months back, when we explore the gay Wolverine of another universe. And in that episode, we look at the 616's Wolverine's first appearance for the first time. So if you didn't catch 135, you can hear us talk about his first appearance in Hulk there.
Yes, but let's talk a little bit more about our backgrounds with Wolverine, because we've touched on this in the past. But Guido, you of course are the ultimate X-Men fan. So where does Wolverine land for you in your fandom?
Well, and I'm sure I mentioned this on 135. I frankly don't remember, so you might be hearing it again. But as an X-Men collector, Wolverine was always in my orbit. And while I don't love him in the way that a real Wolverine fan loves him, I also don't dislike him. So I have bought lots of his title over the years, read lots of his titles over the years. And in particular, when my fandom increased and when my own personal income increased as I was like a teenager and moving beyond allowances, I would buy Wolverine's title and every miniseries because it was tied into the X-Men, so I had to have it. So I have consumed almost all the Wolverine that's out there to consume, and I'm fine with him. I don't love him. I don't dislike him. He's right middle of the road, I guess, for me. And of course, I've consumed every multimedia iteration of him. And this comic that we read today, I know we both consumed, so we'll get into that. But in terms of Wolverine, remind our listeners your background on the character.
I think a bit of the same as you, where it's a little bit middle of the road. He wasn't a character I gravitated to all the time, but he also wasn't a character I avoided. So I liked him so much of my understanding of the character. And even when I was just reading today's issue, I hear it in the voice of Cal Dodd from X-Men, the animated series. I can't help but do that. And I even mentioned on our last episode covering Deadpool and Wolverine that I never really loved Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, even though I get it. He's a really good, it's a good performance, but he wasn't my Wolverine. And I think that's just because Cal Dodd's voice is just so ingrained in my brain that because Hugh wasn't that, he wasn't Wolverine to me.
Well, and this issue has a lot of I could hear the lines coming out of Cal Dodd's mouth, even though this actually predates the animated series. But there's something about this issue, and we'll get into it, of course, that I can totally hear that too.
Well, throw on your loincloth and grab your claws. It's ready for Origins of the Story.
Right now, on this very show, you're going to get the answer to all your questions. Our amazing story begins a few years ago.
So for this segment, we actually aren't going to cover a story. What? Oh no! But let's actually cover Wolverine and team up, since it's our main issue has him teaming up with a whole bunch of amazing Marvel characters. So from
some randoms, but yeah.
Randoms, well, maybe not so random. I don't know. We'll discuss. But from his very first debut, Wolverine was a social character, which is ironic because his story becomes so much about him being that loner guy.
It is funny that he's always with other people, and known for those team ups or mashups or even fights. But yeah, is also the man who wants to be left alone, like that sort of Western cowboy guy.
Yeah, because really his in his opening debut, you think of him paired up with the Incredible Hulk. And then that obviously is followed by him joining the X-Men in their big major reboot. But Guido, can you tell us about his other team-ups?
Yeah. Oh, there are a lot, but let's give a little history here. So, of course, there's the title Marvel team-up, which predates Wolverine's first appearance. It starts in 71 or 72 and is really a title for Spider-Man team-ups. He's in every issue. So it's not until 1982's number 117 that Wolverine shows up for his one appearance in that volume. They did have Wolverine in the Marvel team-up annual in 1976 with the whole new giant-size X-Team, but Wolverine's first solo team-up with Spidey is not till 82. And so aside from the fact that he debuted in someone else's title, then of course had his most famous appearances be part of a team. 1982 is his first solo title. It's a mini-series, and it's not until 88 that he gets his ongoing. Neither of those actually feature too many team-ups. They do have a constant cast of supporting and guest characters, and lots of antagonists, both familiar and new. So at this point, though, Wolverine's star is rising in the mid-80s, and he's crossing over into a lot of books, and Marvel Comics Presents essentially becomes a vehicle for Wolverine. Some of the stories are solo, expanding on his origin, but others feature him teaming up with Havoc, Hulk, Ghost Rider, Cable, Nightcrawler, Typhoid Mary, Venom, Black Widow, and Doc Samson. You know, these like anthology spotlight books always pull in like D-list folks that no one even remembers, which is
I'm not going to say any of those are D-list. Right?
Doc Samson, come on. Doc
not
Samson
a D-list. I'm going to put him at high
C-list.
C, low B.
I don't know.
Typhoid Mary in the same level, I'd say, right?
And Havoc
none
is
of them
like
are
D-list. Havoc
yes,
is
he's
B
B-list.
for sure.
And then the rest of them are kind of A-list
The rest
characters.
of them are major.
Yeah.
Anyway, but that's not all, because he has so many miniseries, one-shots, tie-in team-up books. I would venture a guess he probably has the most miniseries of any character in the Marvel universe. Maybe Spider-Man has more, but Spider-Man has always had his flagship anchor books, and usually at least two. So I don't think he's had as many minis as Wolverine. So his first major team-up series predates even having an ongoing, and that's the Wolverine and Kitty Pryde miniseries from 1984. Then in 86, he has a one-shot team-up with Spider-Man. In 88, so same year as his launch, he has a miniseries with Havoc. 93 gets a mini with Punisher. 95, very famous, very good foil covers team-up book with Gambit. 96 with Venom. And then since 96, we've had team-up books or one-shots miniseries with The Thing, Iron Fist, Elektra, Hulk, Dupe, Spider-Man, Captain America, Black Cat, The Agents of Atlas, Power Pack, Jubilee, Hercules, Quentin Quire, Nick Fury, Alpha Flight, Deadpool, Boom Boom, yes, Boom Boom, Blade, and most recently Predator, although that's a versus book, so it's not quite a team-up. So a lot of people
Yeah.
who are sometimes getting like above the title credits because
They're getting
in
the
a book with
Wolverine bump, basically.
Exactly. I mean, there's so many team-ups. Why does this character have so many team-ups? I guess just because he's giving them a bump. I think that's one reason. Truly,
well,
actually.
That's the commercial reason.
Yeah.
But I think the artistic reason is I think he's just got the perfect personality to fit with all these other characters. Like, I'm thinking, like, he plays well off of Scott Summers because Wolverine's the rule breaker and Scott follows the rules. He plays off of well off of Deadpool because Wolverine's more serious and Deadpool's funny. Like, in this book, he can play off of Namor because they both can take themselves a little too seriously and have, like,
they're
big
both
egos.
like grumpy people.
Yeah. So you can put him into all these different scenarios, and I think different elements of his personality can come out. Like, sometimes he's probably the funny one. Like with Scott, he's the funny one and Scott's the serious one. But with Deadpool, he's the serious one and Deadpool's the funny one. So there's a lot of flexibility there. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I guess in part it's and I feel like we've talked about this sort of paradox where because he's a remarkably consistent and clear character, it actually makes him quite versatile. And so I think that makes a lot of sense. I do think a lot of it is commercial, though. I mean, when you look at this roster of people he's teamed up with, like, no one wanted to read a Dupe book before Wolverine was in it. And I know Dupe has lots of fans and he's a very funny little character, but, you know, Power Pack is a good example. Boom Boom is so random. And then when you go back even into like Marvel Comics presents the Havoc and doing a Havoc miniseries, like that's just, it's all just a little where you're like, this is weird. Why did this happen? I think the only like ones that make a ton of sense are Kitty Pryde, which is great and totally retcons origin stuff and is a lasting impact. And then people like Punisher and Gambit and Venom, like these characters make a ton of sense. But beyond that, I think he's teamed up with almost everyone.
Yeah, there's something, you said Power Pack and Kitty Pryde, and then of course in the movies as well, they've paired him with a kid. And even in the comic, I mean, even in the animated series, him and Jubilee are often paired together.
So
there's something about
together,
there's something about putting Wolverine with a child or a younger character that there's a lot of dynamics there to play off.
Yeah,
of.
well, he can be the like reluctant, gruff father figure who has a heart but does not want to be around kids or having to take care of people. So I think it's fun. Well, while we're talking about team ups, what's your fantasy team up that you want to see? What's a team up book? Let's stay realistic, so let's stay in Marvel. What's a team up book you want to see with Wolverine?
Oh, the one I was just going to say. See, he's teamed up with so many people. The one I was going to
there
say.
Are very few left.
Is actually in the list. I just missed his name before. But I was going to say Nick Fury. Because
that even has a graphic novel and a follow-up series. There's a good chunk of that. But why do you want to see it even though you haven't read it?
Well, because I think they both, that would be one of those times where they have similar personalities versus like a Scott and Logan kind of thing, where sometimes like when you put the two characters that have similar personalities together, there's going to be a lot of tension. And maybe Nick was, you could retcon it too, that Nick was involved in Project X or something like that, right? Like that he was tied to Wolverine's origin story, maybe. I don't know. There's a lot of possibilities there.
Yeah, there's lots of spy craft, and Wolverine's origin has lots of spy stuff. So yeah, that does happen. That's an interesting one.
What about you? What do you think?
It's hard for me to decide because I've read all these books and I've read all the team books where he gets lots of interactions. What I'd say is my two favorite X-Men characters are Rogue and Gambit. We've seen Wolverine and Gambit, and I think Rogue would be really interesting. You see them interact a lot as teammates, but we've never pulled the two of them out. Generally, a team-up miniseries book, that's what it's doing. It's pulling the characters out and putting them somewhere else. So they'll go off and have to solve this crime, or they both get stuck somewhere together or something like that. And I think that'd be really fun with Rogue, because I think Rogue's tough, no-nonsense edge and sarcasm would work really well. The two of them clearly love each other deeply, are two very close characters that have never had a romantic interaction, and I would not want to see that. I appreciate that they're totally platonic, but are very close, and so
there's almost
I'd be
something about
Rogue.
The touch too, right? Like Rogue can't touch people and Wolverine can touch people, but he's got the claws, so it's also almost doesn't want to be touched, right? Yeah, so there is something interesting there. Like he can keep you at bay because he has the claws. She wants to be touched, but she can't touch you. So there is an interesting dynamic there to explore.
And her southernness, and even though he's not obviously from the southern United States, but he has that like sort of gruffy, edgy, like country feel that you get, and so I think the two of them would be really fun for a good miniseries.
And the other character we didn't mention is Sabretooth, because Wolverine is one of those superheroes who has such a definitive
although they have
arch
really
nemesis.
not teamed up. Now, there's a few books where you get to see them team up for stupid reasons, of course, like comics. And then in the past, you get to see the history when they, with Maverick, were secret agents. But there are not team-up books for Wolverine and Sabretooth. I actually looked thoroughly to make sure I wasn't forgetting something. But no, they really are always in antagonism with each other. So that's why.
But that would be interesting.
Name him.
Since Sabretooth really is just evil Wolverine. So, like, having them actually have to pair up for whatever reason and seeing...
Yeah.
That
and it's
you have two
happened. I mean,
characters-
Sabretooth has been on the X-Men before, so it's happened. But it has, again, it's not been a mini-series solo book. So that would be a possibility. Yeah, so lots of fun team-ups. Some of those we're going to cover at some point because some of them actually get pulled into the what-if titles, especially around Spider-Man. There's a what-if that has to do with their relationship. So we will explore some of these team-ups again in the future.
Oh, what? Guido just disappeared. Oh, I think he's been teleported to some mysterious island somewhere. Okay, so it's time to explore some multiversity.
I am your guide through these vast new realities. Follow me and ponder the question, what if?
And today we are discussing Wolverine Global Jeopardy #1 from Marvel Comics. It's actually, though, entitled The Heart of Animals. I totally missed that title in there.
Taken from the quote. There's an opening quote that's taken from.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. And that cover date is December 1993. Our question, of course, is what if Wolverine teams up with Ka-Zar, Shanna, is it Ka-Zar and Shanna? Who knows? And Namor, or is it Namor, to save endangered species from, ironically, the Conservator.
The Conservator. All right. So this book is written by Peter David, penciled by Richard Howell, inked by Bill Anderson, colored by Richard Howell, lettered by Steve Dutro, and edited by Glenn Herdling. So at this point, writer Peter David had his first story in Spider-Man in 1985. It was bought by the editor at that point, although he was not working so much in the writing of comics. He was brought in through sales by Carol Kalish, who you'll hear about again in just a moment, as she is quite key to this issue. He gets a handful more Spideys to see the light of day before being given the Hulk title in 1987. That starts a 12-year legendary run. At the time, he'd written some novels, especially some licensed tie-ins and some sci-fi stuff in his own universe, and a few random single issues for DC in the late 80s, early 90s. After this, 1993, of course, he goes on to tons of famous runs, including Spider-Man, She-Hulk, Supergirl, Young Justice, tons of Star Trek comics, and my favorite for Marvel, X-Factor, the longest run on X-Factor and a really, really kooky run on X-Factor. So that's Peter. Richard Howell, at this point, is prior to this, was partnered to Carol Kalish. Again, more in a minute. The two of them co-edited some magazines, and in 1982, he starts some work at Marvel. Then in 83, DC. He does some co-plotting and what's called producing of books, but also draws. He draws and does the co-plotting on Hawkman and Vision and Scarlet Witch, as well as a bunch of single issues from things like Marvel Fanfare and What If. And the same year that this book is out, he relaunched Vampirella and co-founds the Claypool Comics Company, best known by me and many people for the 150-plus issue run of Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, which he wrote and drew also. So very cool work that Richard has done. We'll get back to Carol Kalish in just a moment, but let's give a synopsis of this book since it is digital, which is unusual for a book like this, but most people probably have not read it, or if they did, they read it in 1993 and don't remember it.
Well, I'm going to spoil the whole thing here, so watch out. But Wolverine, Namor, Ka-Zar and Shanna each witness rare animals disappearing before their eyes. Their investigation brings them to discover that a being known only as the Conservator has been whisking the animals away to his island Castillo? Who knows? To keep them safe. He imprisons the heroes, but Zabu calls Devil Dinosaur in to free them all.
Because
Shanna
he's multilingual. I love that.
Yes, he's multilingual.
Zabu is multilingual amongst animals.
So Shanna explains to the Conservator that they are all on the same side, and he would be better off helping the animals fight for their place in the world than hiding them away. So the Conservator partners with the WWF, the World Wildlife Fund, to make his island a sanctuary for animals. And then the book ends with our heroes prepared to stop a poaching, only to discover it is a documentary crew instead, and they all have a nice laugh.
Yeah, because the people are saying they're going to shoot the animals, but of course, that's with a camera. Puntastic.
Yes. And we should also mention that every few pages, there are also
every right page of the book.
Oh, every right page, yes.
Yeah.
There are photos and also bite-sized facts about different endangered animals that are, for the most part, featured in those pages. And it also ends with some tips to help the environment.
And before we dig into that story, for those who don't know this issue, there are 3 important background things to know. So number 1, it has an embossed cover. So that's important because that's what everyone sort of remembers. I don't even know. We'll have to ask 10 Cent Takes and Mike, who loves gimmick books. Like, is this the first embossed cover? I doubt it. It's 1993. I'm sure there's been embossed. But for some reason, this one stood out in at least both our minds. I think most people remember this cover really well. Why?
Yeah, I do remember. Well, but I guess because it was so rare that having that cardstock and the and it's also because it's all black with like stars, and then the heroes really pop in it. So there's so much that Richard Howell actually does with color throughout this book that really stayed in my memory, and I think it starts with the cover with that stark contrast.
And the logo
is
embossed too, which yeah, I guess just because there's something tactile about the embossed. I mean, it's just weird because, like, I guess at a certain angle it looks cool, but I think it's more about the tactile part of it. So it's just interesting that embossing was like a thing to get people to buy books and stands out in our minds. And it hasn't come back. We're in an age where they're redoing gimmick books. Like, there's been tons of foil covers. There's been a few like scratch and sniff or glow in the dark covers. There are the die cut covers, but I don't think embossed has really made a return just yet, so maybe it will. But
I know we'll talk. Oh, I was going to say too, I know we'll talk more about PSA books as well, but for the most part they seemed so superfluous, like, oh, they were cheaply made, right? But I think because this had this fancy cover, it made this,
it felt
like,
prestige.
To me, for me as a little kid, it was like, ooh, this is fancy, even though
this one was totally
kind of
a prestige book.
Like,
I agree. And so on it being a PSA book, of course, public service announcement, this book was apparently produced with the one and only WWF, though World Wildlife Fund. Not the Wrestling Federation. At the time, those of us who were kids in the 80s and 90s thought there were 2 WWFs, but the WWF that protects animals put the kibosh on that at some point. They were founded in 1961 and are still to this day the largest conservation organization in the world. Now, we could not find a whole lot about what this meant, that it was a co-production, produced in cooperation is the language on the title. The signs of this are, of course, the photos that Rob mentioned. There is a synopsis of the organization's work on the inside cover and a few tips at the back that are like real typical environmental movement greenwashing in the 90s, like, you know, turn off the lights when you leave a room and you'll save the world. But it's not clear if there was any sort of profit sharing or anything like that was happening, or what else the arrangement was. And we couldn't find that information. So we will talk more about PSA books in a few minutes in our next segment. So I'm going to share the third and final thing about this book that everyone should know, which is a little bit about its genesis. The book seems to exist for Carol Kalish. So the person we referred to was the Marvel sales department lead, who is credited with creating essentially the direct market of comics. There's lots of really cool anecdotes you can find online. There is some pushback. There's actually some controversy about her. It's interesting, but let's disregard that because I'm sure misogyny plays a role in that. And she is clearly someone who had a role, if not led, in comic books being able to be actual thriving businesses. And she would visit the stores, she would help them figure out how to order comics, how many to order, how to deal with their cash flow. She did a project where Marvel bought cash registers for all the local shops, and they were subsidized, and really interesting stuff she was doing, obviously on behalf of Marvel as a company. That may have led to the destruction of the direct market eventually, ultimately, but her work seems to have really been committed to helping comic books thrive. She also got comics into bookstores for the first time. So really, she is remarkable in all of that. And sadly died quite young at age 36 in 1991. She had hired Peter David, giving him his start, and he wrote a very long eulogy in Comic Book Resources or one comic book interview, one of the comic book magazines, and was partnered to Richard Howell for many years. They worked together and lived together. So that
and the company they actually worked for before Marvel, I saw, then eventually became Diamond. So even before joining Marvel, she was so keyed into what would become the direct market. Like she was doing it before it even existed.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see that side of things, and especially being so young that she was able to have such an impact. So at the back of the book, there is also a dedication to her from Terry Stewart, then president of Marvel Entertainment. And he doesn't really talk about why the book exists. And it's still not totally clear why, like, did she love the WWF, or was the timing just that it worked out that way? But the fact that Peter David and Richard Howell are both on the book says to me that it had to have something to do with Carol Kalish. But they don't make it crystal clear, like, again, why it's the WWF and Carol Kalish. The only thing that is clear, other than Peter and Richard, is that Carol Kalish loved Devil Dinosaur since she was a child. Yeah. And of course, as you mentioned, Devil Dinosaur came swooping in and saved them. So clearly the story was created with this memory of Carol in mind, but the WWF link is still a little mysterious out there. So
unknown.
Yeah. So let's dig into the story, the book. What did you think rereading it?
Well, this was a book that was seared in my memory. I don't know why. It's one of those random books, but there's something about this book. It must be the embossed cover, but it really just stood out for me as a book because I didn't love any of these characters. They weren't my favorites.
But did you love Endangered Species? Like, this is I mean, I'm a little older than you, but I remember there was that mail order fundraising thing you'd do at school, and they always would sell shirts with different endangered species on them. So,
yeah, is that where the wolf shirts
kids started? Endangered species. I think so.
We think of the 90s and we think of those corny painted wolf shirts and stuff like that.
So some of that might be why this resonated with you so much. Is just all the animal stuff.
It was out there too because, of course, I was a big Captain Planet fan, and there was something also, I guess, like you said, greenwashing, or it was so in vogue in this time in the 90s, everywhere you went. And I remember just even on Sesame Street or later other animated shows always doing some environmental stuff. Fern Gully, The Last Rainforest. I love that animated thing too. So it was in the ether, so maybe that's why I did gravitate to it. I don't really know, but everything from the cover to even reading the pages, and it's just stayed in my memory. So it was very fun going back to reread this so many years later.
Well, it also has, I mean, I love Peter David. I'm a big Peter David fan. We got to meet Peter David a few times at different cons. He's always willing to share great stories, and I love his writing, and it's here. Everything that's good about him, he took this very simple book that is quite short for a comic because every other page is the endangered species. So it's a very brief comic, not interested in background, not interested in character. Clearly, that's not the purpose of it. And yet he gave all the characters so much life, and their dialogue is funny and witty. And there's these great moments where Wolverine makes fun of Namor for being the only person that's wearing less than Ka-Zar wears.
I love that joke.
and then you commented right after reading it, you commented about Shayna and the great sort of meta moment where they start fighting, where Namor and Wolverine start fighting, and she calls it obligatory, as if that story device in comic books, superhero books, is obligatory, and it's true. So it just has that Peter David essence in it, even though it's not a quintessential Peter David book, and I think that makes it stick.
Yeah, Shayna especially has some really good lines. There's one earlier where they think they hear it is a gunshot, but she says something about like a car backfiring, and of course they live in like the middle of the jungle, and Ka-Zar says like, Shayna, you're so ridiculous. That she has a lot of, and she kind of is the one who swoops in at the end of the day too. Maybe knowing that this was dedicated to Carol, he wanted to give a little extra emphasis to the female character in the book.
Yeah, with the exception that Richard Howell draws the most absurd outfit ever on Shayna. I mean, it is the inspiration for the Jennifer Lopez Grammys dress. There is no doubt in my mind, because how she is keeping this bathing suit that only exists basically on her left and right side and does not exist down the center of her body, how it's even like staying up is beyond any law of physics. So other than the absurd outfit and the fact that she gets hit in the head with a rock and taken out of the story kind of early on, I agree with you that she has the best dialogue.
Well, but on that note too, the men are very scantily clad, as is that joke as well. Maybe as a boy, even as it being like a PSA about like saving the planet, it's like, oh, here's all these like hunky guys running around too.
Yeah, Wolverine looks ridiculous because he is with just 3 half-naked people for sure.
He is,
and it is so silly. Now you love villains, and the Conservator has never shown up ever again. Do you want the Conservator to be an ongoing villain?
Well,
he's also sort of just a copy of a few existing villains, like the Collector, and then you pointed out he looks like the Stranger.
He looks like the Stranger, and then there's this weird little joke where Shayna is reading The Stranger by Albert Camus. So I was thinking, oh, that must be why is she reading this book?
I didn't know. I don't know. It is so weird to me because it's not even the quote at the beginning, which is some weird 1628 dedication to King Charles. The quote that inspires the title, which is, "The heart of animals is the foundation of their life, the sovereign of everything within them, the sun of their microcosm." But she could have been reading that, whatever that came from.
Yeah, and isn't it like the ultimate book about existentialism, which this is like the least existential story as well? It's kind of the opposite of it, too.
He's definitely writing like Ka-Zar as the bimbo kind of, in a stereotypical situation. She's the smart one. She's the one who gets on the computer to call the essentially stand-in for the WWF director that she knows. She's the one who's wearing her glasses and reading a book. Like, she definitely is supposed to be the clever one of these two. For sure.
Totally.
And the deep one of these two, I suspect, too.
But the Conservator basically is like an amalgam of all those, what are they, the elders of the universe. He looks exactly like the Collector. I looked it up because I couldn't remember exactly what the Collector looked like in comics, and even the color scheme, where like these magenta with the white hair, it's exactly the same colors even. So I guess they couldn't use the Collector because he was a pre-existing character. And
I don't know. That's what's weird. Like, that's what's sort of weird about this book is, who cares if it's supposed to exist in continuity? But then it seemed like, were they trying to have it fit into continuity? I don't know. I know lots of people have sort of gotten stuck on the fact that Ka-Zar and Shanna were almost never in Africa, and yet for some reason the caption box has them in Africa here, so there's like mistakes in continuity.
Well, one
and then,
piece I read,
why not use the Collector for this? But would you have to explain his motivation more, or you don't want him to be a hero at the end? I don't know.
One piece on that I read online, just a speculation, I guess, was maybe because this book, being that it was together with the WWF and was going out to a wider audience, they didn't want to just like confuse people with what the Savage Land was, so they just said Africa. That was the speculation I had seen.
Yeah, and that might be why it's not the Collector or the Stranger or some other.
They didn't want
character.
to just throw in
but
another
of course
character.
They're not like most people don't know Ka-Zar and Shanna or even Namor at this point. So it's the title of the book is even Wolverine in Global Jeopardy. But as we pointed out when we were reading it, it's very evenly split amongst the three core character groups. So it's not clear why they made up the Conservator and why he never made another appearance. But
but it's
one day.
Yeah, it would be interesting if they tried. I guess the issue is if you make him out into an out-and-out villain, he does just become the High Evolutionary or the Collector or all those other characters that
right,
are
that's what I mean. He has to be redeemable.
So he has to be redeemable.
He's motivated by protecting. He has to be motivated by protecting animals. He's just doing it the wrong way. And on that, like, I don't get what Peter David's reacting to. It's sort of a weird message. Like, there's so much speechifying at the end about like hiding and running solves nothing, and if you really cared about animals, you'd be out there educating people. And it's what's weird about that is like I don't think anyone was actually doing this, right? Like, usually when you get a social issue heavy-handedness like that, it's to say like, no, it's better to be out there and fight and blah, blah, blah. But in this case, she's like, don't hide the animals. People need to know about them. And it's like, well, were people hiding animals? Like, what is he reacting? Like, and I guess it's not that. I guess he's trying to say, go out there and raise awareness and fight for animals, but he's doing it through the lens of this character. It's just sort of reads weird because I'm like, is he saying people are out there like hiding animals and shouldn't be? I don't know what that is.
Yeah. You could read it if you really read into it. I guess you could read like an anti-zoo argument.
I was wondering that too, if that was possibly it, which I am definitely anti-zoo, so I would be fully supportive of. But maybe they didn't want to let him do that because they would offend people, or
especially for kids, where a lot of kids go to zoos, so they didn't want to say like, "Don't go to zoos, kids." But I would have to think the WWF, I mean, it's the World Wildlife Fund, like wildlife, not zoos. So maybe that was kind of a subtle way to introduce that idea.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but it's fun. It's worth revisiting. It's fun. It's sort of meaningless and throwaway, but I like it. And
yeah, like you said, there's lots of good dialogue. Namor, he has a lot of fun with his pomposity, and there's those puns, like the fact that it ends on this kind of punny joke. And I think Richard Howell's art, I was saying to you before we started recording, like, I think, or even going back to the cover, just the art stands out at me. There's something about the colors, which he also did here, that just really, they're super bright colors. Like, it's not faded at all. It almost reminds me of like when like the All Reds work on comics and everything is like super bright and articulate in that way.
It is, and I pointed out to you too, it is very Silver Age, but the other thing that might be happening here is it's printed on glossy paper, which also might be part of why it felt like a prestige book. And so that probably preserved the color really well, because it's very Silver Age looking, but unlike those which were printed on newsprint where the colors would fade fast, this is on glossy, and so I think that helps it pop.
Yeah, definitely worth.
So do you want a sequel to this story? Do you want Wolverine in Global Jeopardy 2? Wolverine in Double Jeopardy?
Well, that would be a great title, of course. Well, I think the interesting thing is that it is ripe for a sequel because now we're really seeing the effects of climate change far more than we were in 1993. So I think doing like a book like this today would actually be very smart. And Wolverine as a character who is connected to the Earth, and also a character who's been around like in his own life for hundreds of years. So he's seen the way that the Earth has shifted. Like that's actually a really good character to tell a climate change story through. So I think it would be less about like tearing down the rainforest, which I'm sure is still happening and isn't a big issue, and maybe something more about climate change and pollution as a whole.
That would be so interesting. But let's move into our third segment, because we're going to talk about if that could exist today or not.
Yes, so let us ponder some possibilities.
Will the future you describe be averted, averted?
So Guido, what are we talking about for pondering possibilities?
Well, let's talk about the PSA comic aspect of this, the public service announcement aspect. And we're not going to do a history of public service announcement comics. Our friends at 10 Cent Takes often go down the rabbit hole of where these things come from. And they have a great history in their Heroes for Hope X-Men Benefit Book episode. So go check that out. But there are countless PSA books that we also love collecting. I love collecting, like Captain America Meets the Asthma Monster and Spider-Man Stopping Child Abuse and Storm Stopping Drug Use. And it's really a fun area of comics to collect, but it does seem to have gone out of vogue. They're definitely not as common. And I'm wondering why, and could it work for them to come back? Why don't they come back? Why isn't there a Wolverine and Double Jeopardy partnering with, if not the World Wildlife Fund, then some other climate crisis organization or even the UN or something like that? So what are you thinking about that?
Well, and for us, people who grew up in the 80s or 90s, it was just so common, not just in comic book form, but on so many animated programs. He-Man and G.I. Joe always ended with their PSAs. And then even when a show didn't have that, it had the moral element into the storyline as well. So I think we were just so accustomed to it. And maybe that's one of the reasons why this book stood out to me, is it didn't seem like, oh, that's so rare, that's so special. I was just so used to it. And I wonder if a younger generation is not used to that now.
And on TV, of course, that was all through regulation, which has everything been deregulated, so it doesn't exist anymore. In comics, though, I don't think it was ever regulatory that they were doing that. I think it was probably these groups realizing comics are a medium to get to kids. And so, hey, let's partner with Marvel or DC to send this message. And so either a government agency or a non-governmental organization like the WWF would probably pay in most cases. Again, I don't know how this worked, but pay for that or arrange that or something. And so, yeah, maybe it was happening, though, because what you're saying is culturally children's entertainment had more of that in it. But I think it was coming about for a different reason. And I just don't know why it doesn't persist. Part of me wants to imagine now it's the controversy of it. These are all now big corporate conglomerates. Of course, DC was under Warner Brothers at the time, but the world has changed a lot. And I don't know, maybe they would just be worried about who they're partnering with or what it means. I mean, there's the totally neutral ones that could be done today. Like there's all those car safety ones. There's Supergirl and the seatbelt one. We have that. That's a fun one. So, though that was done actually with Honda. So there's still ones that could be done today that seem not controversial. I don't think anyone's going to care if Supergirl released an issue telling people to wear seatbelts, although someone probably would actually. So
I was just going to say, I think like that's maybe their concern is like there's nothing not controversial and there's nothing neutral. Because I was thinking like, oh, you could do something on anti-smoking, and then it's like, the woke comics telling our children not what to and not to smoke.
Smoking actually could be one of the few safe ones, because I think most people would agree it's okay to tell children not to smoke. But yeah, you're right. Like even seatbelts or certainly like nutrition, people would be like, "Oh, you're infringing upon our freedom by having this comic book come out." So I
Or
don't know
maybe
why
they
they
think-
don't do them.
Unless they think also there's other ways to get these messages out that aren't through comics. So organizations are like, oh, kids aren't reading comics, so better do it on YouTube or TikTok or something that he's actually going to target. I mean, I guess that would be a question, and I don't know, like, are a lot of kids even reading comics in general? Like, would a PSA get through to that audience, or is it more like people in their 30s that are reading comics?
Well, I'm not in my 30s, but people in their 30s need social messages too.
They do, but not like this kind of social storytelling. Yeah.
But, well, you're making me realize too, there are actually social issue comics. One, they're usually driven by story. So of course there's plenty of comics that are biographical or memoir or telling a history. Those are becoming more and more increasingly popular, usually at indie publishers. But you're also reminding me, just a few years ago, with Kelly Sue DeConnick was one of the bigger names, but a bunch of great people committed to it. There was that anthology book that the New York City Department of Education did, which was all comic book stories, again, about real life heroes, but they self-published it. And that's interesting. I wonder, so there are some public agencies, nonprofits, awareness organizations that want to use comics, and yet at least the big two are not entering into these partnerships anymore. So I don't know. There is something in that, I think.
And DC's Pride book touches sometimes on some, I wouldn't say PSA, but kind of
It's
certainly
not a
social
PSA
issues.
at all. No, and social issues should be present in stories and shouldn't always feel relegated to PSA books. For 10,000% sure, I stand behind that. But yeah, I'm thinking about a book that like is just blatantly out there to like deliver to raise awareness about one issue. And there were AIDS awareness books in the early 90s. Those don't exist. And the big two never did a dedicated AIDS awareness book. Of course, there's like Peter David's Hulk, which has an AIDS awareness issue. But I can't think of dedicated PSA books recently.
What issue do you think, like, if a comic did pick it up, what issue would you want to see them cover?
Any. I just want it. Honestly, I just want it to exist. I'd be totally behind a here's how to cross the street safely book, just as much as I'd be behind a AIDS awareness book. Or, I mean, there's the very famous pages. I actually had them hanging on my office wall for many years of the pro-immigration Superman pages that were done. Those were PSA pages that were published in other books back in the 50s, and they were all about like being welcoming to people coming to the country. So I'd take anything, because I think generally these are oriented around making people healthier or making the world a better, more inclusive place, and so I'm always in agreement with those messages.
Yeah, it would be interesting to partner characters with a topic. Like, I'm thinking, going back to climate change, could like Storm make sense to do something with climate change? If it's a medical issue, do you put like Doctor Strange, because he's a medical doctor? Like, it could be fun to find
do a whole
character.
little series of them, or an anthology book or something.
Yeah, I love to see an anthology book that takes a character that like specializes in something and then puts them
have Doctor
into
Strange
that
and
story.
Doctors Without Borders, and
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
like
it would be
Iron
so
Man
cool. But
and technology or something like that. Yeah.
yeah, he can be with the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and yeah, it would be really cool. But I have a feeling it's the corporate entities will not make partnerships with these organizations that, they do in other ways, of course. Sometimes they have their like charitable giving arms or whatever that thing is, but I have a feeling that with the IP they don't want to like go down that road, which is very annoying. So I don't think we're going to see Wolverine in Double Jeopardy anytime soon.
It's the sequel to Deadpool and Wolverine. Well, an adaptation of this comic.
a cause movie. Those always do well. Well, that is a wrap, dear watchers. Go out there and save an animal, but make sure you share it with the world and don't keep it to yourself. And thank you for listening. I have been your host of this episode of Jeopardy, Guido.
And I have been Rob, reminding you to always spay and neuter your pets.
The reading list is in the show notes. Find us online at Dear Watchers, especially on Threads and Instagram.
And leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen. We'll be back soon with another trip through the multiverse.
In the meantime, keep pondering the possibilities.